Well, again, really appreciate y'all being here. I'm excited about this talk. This isn't necessarily like directly JobTread related, but I think it's really, really important, to help you all be able to build a very financially sound business. We have essentially taken everything that we've learned running multiple companies and put it into this financial playbook. You all should have a little handout here fresh off the press. So, hopefully not too many typos or anything in it, but I think it's looking really good. As Peter Drucker said, let's see, let me get my slides going. There we go. What gets measured gets managed. As a quick show of hands, how many of you all have a formal annual budget in place today? Few? Handful? I know finances can feel intimidating, but trust me, with the right approach, it can be very empowering for you. We're going to dive deep into how to financially build a strong, sustainable, and thriving business. This isn't just about the numbers, though. It's also about the strategy, the process, how you can take control of your company's future. I've learned a lot over the years building multiple companies. The first one was a software company. Second one was a construction company. I've got a construction software company. But this is all of those insights crammed into this one playbook. It's the culmination of a lot of our experience, the lessons that we've learned, and the strategies that have proven successful time and time again. My goal is to give you actionable takeaways and a tool that you can immediately put into action for your own business. So let's get started. We're going to explore how we can help you build more financially sound companies. So, I want to hear from you all. Why do you think you need an annual budget? Anyone?
If you don't have a plan, you plan to fail.
There you go. If you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. Great. What else?
So you maybe don't manage based on what is left over. So you create your leftovers.
Yep. Don't manage what's left over. That's being reactive instead of proactive. Anyone else? You don't have a sales goal, you don't know what to reach. Exactly. An annual budget is your financial game plan for the entire year. It's what's going to drive every decision that you make. It projects your revenue, your expenses, your profits month by month. It's going to help you to better make decisions, track your progress, and stay in control. There's so many benefits of using an annual budget within your company. Being able to set the clear goals, just like a gentleman said. Tracking and controlling your expenses. Plan your hiring. Know when you can afford to bring on people. Create benchmarks. How are you performing? Understanding that. Managing your cash flow. Being able to be proactive in decision making. Instead of being reactive, you can have, control over these decisions. You can time them better. The real cost of not using a budget is that, again, you lack visibility. You lack understanding in your numbers, your profits. Why are you performing the way you are? Poor cash flow management. And again, having to be reactive to everything. A lot of you said you played firefighter, one or many times. This is how you quit playing firefighter. You have to be proactive. You have to plan. So what's in your budget? Again, got a couple key components here. We got our revenue. The total amount you expect to earn across all your jobs. How much you're going to collect from the customers that's going to hit the bank. You got your COGS, your direct expenses related to completing projects. You got your gross profit. The money left over after all of your direct costs for the job. That's reflecting your job level profitability. Now your gross margin, it's going to be your percentage of your profit as a percentage of your revenue. We've got our overhead, all your administrative operational costs that are not directly related to a job. And then we've got our net profit. And that is the remaining, how much you have made after you've paid all of your expenses, after everything else is said and done, on the very bottom line. And your net margin is, really just your net profits expressed as a percentage of your total revenue. So those are the main components. So what's it look like? So this is the template. We're actually going to share this with you at the end. So you're going to get a Google Sheet that you can save a copy of and you can go set up for your own budget. But as you'll notice, it looks fairly similar to your income statement. It's got all of those same components. We're going to go through each of these different sections. So your revenue, your top line sales, the very top of this budget here. This is where we're going to project out all of our sales by month. And you can get as detailed as you want. I mean, this one is just kind of one revenue line item, but if you wanted to break it out by type of job, you could. I know some home builders will do home builds, but they'll also do remodels. Maybe you want to look at, those as two separate line items. You can break that out. This is going to help you to set your monthly goals though. You can look at your annual goal and then you can divide it up monthly. Now, I encourage you all to really think about seasonality. Not every month is created equally. Not every month is going to be as easy as the others. Some months will be very hard, and you need to take that into account when you're forecasting your sales. So let's look at this. Like, what is, forecasting your revenue here? This is the foundation for the entire budget. So you have to get this right. But for budgeting purposes, the revenue is really a function of your leads, your conversion rates, and your average job size. And so let's look at that in more detail. Our sales funnel. At the top of the funnel, we've got all of our new leads coming in. Not every lead, though, is going to be a qualified lead. I'm sure you guys have gotten a lot of leads that aren't qualified leads. So you're going to kind of have a subset of those leads are going to be your qualified leads. And not every qualified lead is going to actually be a good fit with your business, and you might not need or want to bid on every single job. So of those qualified leads, how many proposals are we sending out? And then ultimately, how many customers are we getting? This is the funnel here, right? So if we look at, just kind of an example here, let's say we've got 200 leads at the top of the funnel. Maybe we only have 120 of those are qualified leads that we actually want, to take to the next step. So we meet with 120 of them. Again, maybe we don't bid on every project. Like, not every job, not every opportunity is going to be a good opportunity, a good fit with you and your business. You shouldn't feel the need to have to bid on every single thing that comes your way. Make sure it's a good fit. So let's say we send out 80 proposals. Maybe we got, 25% close rate on those. I mean, that's giving you 20 customers. And so if you have your average job size at 50K, then you've got $1 million in revenue right there. So that's kind of looking at it from the top down. But maybe you're not really sure how many leads you're going to need. And so you can look at it from the bottom up. If your goal is to earn $1 million in sales, well, you should be able to figure out your average job size looking back at your historical jobs. And you can say, okay, well, if I want to get to $1 million in sales, let's divide that by our average job size. That means we need to win 20 jobs. Okay, so if we know that, let's say we convert 10% of our leads, then we're going to take our 20 jobs divided by 10%. That's going to tell us we need 200 leads at the top of the funnel. Does that make sense? The things that are key though, I mean, you got to know your average job size. That is just, it's a very important thing to use when you're forecasting what your sales are going to be. You also need to understand your conversion rates. How many of those leads are converting into customers? Now, again, this may fluctuate over time. It may change over time, but you need to be able to essentially look back at a period of time and say, we got this many leads and it resulted in this many customers. That is going to be one of the assumptions that we need to plug into our model. So tracking that is very important. And again, like I said, you can get as detailed as you want, and you can kind of go down the path here to break out, how many are qualified leads? How many proposals did we send? You can kind of go as far down and get as detailed as you want. I encourage you, if this is your first time building an annual budget, keep it high level, keep it simple. As you get more data, as you get better at this, every year after year, you can, build in and go deeper and deeper and make it more complex. But, again, let's keep it simple. Let's just understand our sales funnel, our leads that are coming in, they're converting, and that's driving what our forecasted revenue is. Does that all make sense? All right. Now, I want to take a second here to talk about marketing, because marketing is what is going to drive that top of the funnel. That is what is going to drive your leads. And when you think about your lead sources, I mean, really, we're going to chalk it up to three main categories. We've got our referrals. Those are, previous customers who are referring their friends, their family. It could be, when you go out networking with, architects, designers, realtors, someone has referred you business. These are your best leads. These are the Glengarry leads. These are the leads that are often the cheapest leads. They may not have any costs associated with them, but they are going to be your absolute best leads. If you could get all of your leads from any one source, this would be the one you would want to get them from. They're coming in warm from somebody else who's referred your business. Now, the reality is, especially starting off, you aren't going to get as many referrals as you may want to. And so that's where we can go down to the next level. How can we drive organic referrals? Again, these can be from your website. These can be from your social media. These can be from blog posts, from YouTube videos, from other content. That's your organic lead generation. This is very, very important that you do this and that you make sure that you have a great looking website. Your website needs to be your best salesperson. That is the face of your company. All of your marketing efforts should drive people back to your website. So make sure it is very, very good. It's professional. It's clean. It works on all size devices. But this is where you're taking those leads and you're converting them into prospects. You're gathering and getting their information. You now know who they are. And ultimately from there, you want to convert them to customers. But then lastly, we've got our paid marketing. This could be, social media ads, Google ads, any sort of influencer, any sort of, sponsorship, whatever you may be doing where you are paying to directly get leads. That's going to be the most expensive way. But fortunately, especially early on when you don't have many referrals and you don't have, much organic SEO going for you, at least you can pay. Now you got to be very aware of what is the cost that you're spending. What is your customer acquisition cost? What is your cost for every lead? Again, this isn't just, we're not going to have an open checkbook here. We need to control that cost. We need to track and monitor that cost. And so again, I said it earlier, it's very important that you understand what is your cost for acquiring a customer. The term is your customer acquisition cost, your CAC, CAC. What is the cost to acquire every single customer? Track that, know that. You can also calculate, to calculate that, you're going to look at your total marketing spend over a period. Let's say, last month, last quarter, last year, and divide it by the number of customers that you got. That is how you calculate your customer acquisition costs. Now, another important thing when you think about this, because it's well, what should my customer acquisition cost be, right? How do you know how much it's worth to spend? Well, that really depends on the size of your project. If you're selling $1,000 job versus $100,000 job versus $1 million job, you're going to be willing to spend a whole lot more money to acquire a customer if it's going to bring you that much more revenue. And so, one way to kind of think about this is sort of looking at the efficiency of your marketing is that you can look at your customer acquisition costs as a percentage of the project. So what revenue did that project bring you and how much did you spend to acquire that customer? An industry, average might be anywhere from, 1 to 5%. 1% would be exceptional. 5% is acceptable. You don't, again, kind of depending on the situation. You may need to spend more, but the goal is you want to make your customer acquisition cost as low as you possibly can. That's why you have to constantly track and monitor your spend. What is working and what is not working. My first company, when I first set up Google Analytics, I thought I was going to just go run or Google Ads. I thought I was going to go run all these ads, and it was just, hey, create a campaign, put in a budget, let it go. And I did that. And then I sort of forgot about it. And I logged back in, 2 months later, and I was thousands of dollars in the hole and I had nothing to show for it. I wasn't managing my spend. I wasn't tracking it. I wasn't staying on top of it. This is a very, very important thing. And you need to make sure that you have somebody who is really, really good at managing your marketing. If you can't do it yourself, and believe me, most people aren't just natural born marketers. If we could do everything ourselves, we wouldn't need to build out a team. But you are going to need to build out a team. And if you can't afford to bring your own marketing in-house, which again, early on, especially early on, you won't be able to, then you need to look for a marketing agency. Find a marketing partner. You can't afford to not have excellent marketing. This is what drives the top of the funnel. And so again, to have a marketing team, you're going to need a huge budget. And until you get that size, you can't expect to just hire one person and that one marketing person is going to be able to be awesome at every facet of marketing. It's like having one, worker out in the field that you think can just do everything. They're not going to be able to be a specialist and everything. And it's so important when you're starting to spend money, especially running paid ads, you have to have somebody who knows what they're doing. I can tell you, I've learned time and time again that you have to have an expert in this. They will make all the difference in the world for you. So find the right partner and invest in that partner. Again, it's great if you want to have a marketing person on staff who's generating content, creating social, doing all that. That's awesome. But make sure that your website is top notch and that your marketing ads and your marketing spend is being managed. And again, like if you want to think about how much money should I be spending on marketing, for every different type of business, it might be a little bit different, but a general kind of rough average might be somewhere between 3 to 7% of your revenue. Again, if you're early on, you might be spending a whole lot more. As you grow, maybe you're getting a lot more efficient and you're not having to spend as much, but you need to plan to invest in marketing. That's how you're going to fill the top of the funnel. All right. So we've kind of talked about how all these things are calculated. This is where we're going to put it together with building your revenue model. This is how you can forecast out. And all of this, again, this tool has been included in that budget. But this is going to give you the ability to set those clear sales goals. And you can get as detailed as you want here. In this example, we're looking kind of at the top part at our leads by source. Anything in blue means you're inputting that. You're populating what is realistic. What do you believe? You're setting a goal for yourself. Now you see that this paid marketing, that one's in black. That means that it's being calculated based on a formula. And so in order to do this, like we want to tie our lead generation and those targets directly to our revenue goals. And so again, we have to make some assumptions. We're going to assume what our close rates are. We're going to, and again, you can get as detailed as you want, and you can have different assumptions based on the type of lead source. You're likely going to close referrals a lot higher than what you're going to close your paid leads coming in. And organic will probably be somewhere in the middle. So just kind of, you got to make these assumptions. Now, I want to also share and caution everyone, like modeling is making a bunch of assumptions. And I can promise you are going to be wildly wrong. You're going to make some wrong assumptions. That's all there is to it, especially if this is your first time doing it. But that's okay. Because what that lets you do is that's going to then start to help you answer questions every month, every quarter, every year. If you didn't hit your target, now you can start to understand why. What assumption did you make that was off? And then let's adjust. Next month, next quarter, next year, we can make adjustments based on our historical data. So you gain so much more insight. I see so many people who just like, I don't know, and they can't come up with something like, at the end of the day, like you just put in a guess. And then as time goes on, look at the historical versus your actual, and you're going to understand, do I need to count for more? Do I need to count for less? That's going to give you so much insight. And again, like I cannot express enough, like the importance of investing in marketing, and tracking all of your lead generation activities, your website, your SEO, your ads, partnerships, referrals, like understand where every single customer came from. And look, this can't be automated 100%. Like you just need to have the conversation. I try to get every single one of our sales team to make sure that they ask, how did you hear about us? Now again, it's not going to be perfect. And believe me, the sales team doesn't collect as much information as I wish they did. But at the end of the day, like put it into your process and make sure you're trying to collect that data. Tracking your spend, your cost per lead, your customer acquisition cost, your total marketing spend, like these are the drivers of your revenue model. It's so important. And just as an aside, and I don't know if you guys have covered the web forms or not, but like you can take the JobTread web form, embed that on your website. And you can have, and again, you're going to need your web developer, they can pass a whole lot more information kind of behind the scenes where it's, you don't actually have to ask these questions, to the user, but there's things called UTM parameters. And when you're running ads and when you're doing, different campaigns, like you can append these UTM parameters and that can be passed into your JobTread automatically, which will give you a ton of insight into how those leads found you and heard about you. tell your web person, tell your marketing person, they're going to know absolutely what that is. But that can really help you start to collect and get a lot more insight into how they found you. All right, so moving on from the revenue, the next section of our model here, right? We've got our COGS, our cost of goods sold, and our gross profit. This is where JobTread can really help you understand your COGS and your gross profit. At the end of the day, this is one of the main drivers here for everything else in the business. So our cost of goods sold, these are generally considered your variable cost. These are directly related to a job. If the job did not happen, then you did not incur these costs. These most common, your subcontractors, materials, labor, machinery, equipment, permits, design fees, commissions, things like that, right? Like these are directly related to your jobs. So how do we estimate what our COGS should be? Again, I'm going to, in this situation, when you're bidding out a job, you need to go figure out for that job, what is our cost to execute this job? Now, when we're modeling, when we're projecting, because we don't know what every single job is going to be, this is where we can actually use our gross profit and our gross profit margin specifically to help us calculate that. Your gross margin is one of the most important drivers of your profitability. So when you're building your budget, like don't just guess at this. You need to look back at your historical data if you have it and ask yourself, like, how did we do? Is this realistic? Was this, a typical job? Like analyze that historical data to understand that. Like, again, this is where JobTread and doing the work to do the job costing today and on every job moving forward is going to give you tremendous insight so that you can better forecast and project how you're going to be able to perform. So again, you may be wondering though, how do I know what my target gross margin should be? Is anyone here willing to share what your target profit margin is? 20%? 20? 33? Anyone higher? 40? Any 40s? 40? 50? Any 50%? 42? Okay, now how did you come up with that? Okay. Someone gave you some insight? Anyone else? How'd you come up with it? There you go. You can look at your overhead to determine how much gross profit do we need to earn to be able to cover our overhead expenses. That is by far, like if you are not making enough money on your jobs to cover your overhead, you got a really big problem. Now, ideally, we're going to also have some leftover. But like I would encourage you when you think about this, like be conservative. When you estimate, when you forecast what your gross profit margin should be conservative. Put in some padding so that if you don't hit that on every single job, which again, you likely won't, you're not going to, again, get into trouble. Build in some padding. Again, I got to tell you guys, I see tons of people at just 50%. They just double their cost. Now, again, that works for some smaller size jobs. As you get larger jobs, you're not going to get a 50% gross profit margin. That's just not realistic. If you're selling a multi-million-dollar home, I can promise you, you're not going to come anywhere close to that. So it's all very dependent on the size of job, the type of job, the industry you're in. That's going to help determine, what your target gross profit should be. But again, it's so important, regardless, you have to understand your overhead cost to make sure that you're covering that. So this next section, again, our overhead, these are generally our fixed cost. So, think of it this way, like your COGS are going to go away if you don't do a specific job. But your overhead, it's going to be there regardless. These are the costs to keep the lights on, the cost to operate the business. Like tracking your overhead is just as important as tracking your COGS. Like these are recurring expenses. Every month, you're going to be paying this. They're going to have a constant impact on your bottom line. Common overhead. I mean, again, your office salaries, your payroll, your rent, utilities, vehicle, insurance, marketing, any professional services, coaches, bookkeepers, accountants, things like that. Software, your JobTread, that's an overhead cost. Any other subscriptions, QuickBooks, things like that. These are ongoing costs that are not directly related to any one job. So the goal here is to get a clear picture of how much it costs to operate your business. And this knowledge it's going to allow you to set realistic pricing. You have to know your overhead to determine how to price your jobs. It's that simple. And so if you're not sure how to price your job, start here and work your way back. Make sure that you can cover your overhead. This is also going to help you plan for the future. When you think about hiring, you need to make sure that you can afford to bring people on at the right time. So speaking of payroll and hiring, payroll is typically, this will be your most expensive cost. This is the largest expense to operate any business, is the people. It's critical that you get this right. If you get payroll wrong, it'll sink your profits. If you get it right, it will fuel your growth. So it's very important, first and foremost, that you define the roles, the responsibilities. You have to know every single person that you bring onto your team, what are they going to do and how are they going to directly impact your sales and your profitability? If you don't see a positive boost, then that means that they are not an efficient hire for you. You've got to time your hires right. And define, what does success look like for each one of these roles? Make sure that's clear up front. Have those expectations right on the table. And then also make sure that you're going to plan to onboard them and train these people. Because think about it, every single month that goes by that they're not productive for your business, they're taking away from your business. They're taking away from your bottom line. So the faster you can get them ramped up, trained, and productive, the more efficient they're going to be and the better impact they will make on the business. And I would also encourage you to think about how you structure their compensation. One of the very first things I did when I took over that construction business is I essentially aligned the salespeople and the project managers with our gross profit. I gave them both 10% of the gross profit on every single job. And that made sure that we sold the job correctly, that we worked with the project managers, that they understood what was in it and what was not in it, and that we had to, as a team, accomplish our goal, which was to hit our target profit margin. And when we did that, great, everyone wins. But when you have compensation structures that aren't directly related to performance, now you can get yourself into trouble. You can get sideways with people. If you're paying a huge salary, but they're not directly driving sales and profitability, at some point that will become a thorn in your side. But if they're directly tied to profitability, the more money the business makes, the more money they make, great, everybody wins. That is the goal. You have to control your payroll because this is your largest expense. You can also use your budget to confirm the right time to hire people. I often see people who just feel so overwhelmed, so stressed that they just want to open up the floodgates and build out a team overnight and just bring on all these people because they think that things are going good, got lots of job flow, awesome, then bam, 1 month it slows down. But you still have that enormous overhead, that enormous payroll nut that you have to pay out every month. So I encourage you not to do that. I encourage you to make sure that you really need that person and that they're going to be productive and you know exactly what role they're going to play, and hire them when you need them and when the model shows you that you can afford it. Cash flow is king here. If you cannot afford to cover their salary, then don't bring them on. All you're doing is you're digging yourself in the hole if you bring people on before you can afford it. And again, you can calculate, your labor efficiency here. You can look at, you look at your total sales divided by the number of employees. That is how efficient every employee is in your business. Industry average is probably somewhere around 150, 200,000, 250,000, somewhere in there. Again, you can kind of look it up for your specific company, but make sure that the people you're bringing on are productive and efficient for your business. And I would say, though, I mean, in general, you do want to try to hire a little bit ahead of your growth. There's nothing worse than people feeling totally overwhelmed, bogged down, frustrated to the point where now they're walking out. So you do need to plan, but that's where, again, you can forecast this, understand your needs, and that helps you to know what you need to do every month to be able to afford to grow the team. All right, so lastly, the bottom line here, your net profit. This is what remains after all other expenses have been paid. It represents the true financial success in the health of your business. It's important that you set a realistic target for your net profit. Your net margin here. We see anywhere, 10 to 15%. This is what is going to fuel your growth. This is going to allow you to continually invest in the business. So important. Consistently tracking your net profit ensures long-term business sustainability. You should not live paycheck to paycheck. You should not try to break even every single month. Like, you need to be stacking this net profit. You need to accumulate cash, build the business. There's so many reasons that this can be that rainy day backup for you. This can be that time when you need to purchase equipment, when you need to invest. It takes creating this net profit to be able to do that. Now, how many of you are taking the time to review your budget versus your actuals every month? Every quarter? Every year? All right, look. If you're not hitting your goals, why? Why did you not hit your goal? If you don't take the time to ask yourself that and ask your team that and to look at your numbers, how can you expect to do any better the next month or the next quarter or the next year? You have to devote the time to analyzing your performance. Compare your budget to your actuals. It's that simple. Are you overinvested or are you underinvested? If you can't report on your actuals in a timely manner so that you can do this review, then you have a problem. You need to hire a bookkeeper, you need to outsource it, find an accounting partner, somebody who can help you. You have to be able to close out the books and analyze, how did you perform? This is how you continually improve. But so many people just skip this. I mean, you should be doing this after every job. Now, you don't have to stop every single job right then and there, but the end of the week, every other week, the end of the month, whatever it is, take the time before you forget, before your project managers forget, before the salespeople forget. They have this knowledge, but it's not going to stick around. You're not going to remember the details. So I encourage you to do it as quickly after every period, after every job closes, after every month. Take the time to meet with the team and say, how do we perform? Let's understand our performance. Did we hit our revenue? Did we hit our gross profit? What's interesting, you can see here, if our budget for revenue is $500,000 and we came in over budget $575,000, awesome. We got a 15% boost there. Our gross profit, though, if our budget was $200K and we came in at $220, we still exceeded our budget. However, our gross profit margin, we actually came down. We didn't earn as much as we thought we were going to earn on our jobs. So even though the numbers might look good, they might not be good, or there might be opportunities for improvement. You can't just assume because you're making more money, because you're driving sales, that that's going to translate to profitability and ultimately to the bottom line. You've got to look at the whole picture. So I encourage you, again, to use a budget and use the tool to understand how you're performing. I mentioned earlier, but it is so important. We highly recommend that you close your books at the end of each period, each month, each quarter. You have to be able to review your performance. And I encourage you to do it on a monthly basis. Schedule a specific time every single month that either you're going to do it if you don't have a bookkeeper, hopefully you have a bookkeeper, or make sure that they are going to do it and deliver those actuals to you at that time every month. It's not on the last day of the month because you need everything to come in. So maybe it's the end of the first week of the next month. But you have to have a preset, defined deadline to have your books closed out so that you understand how did you perform. You don't need to get lost in every single detail. Like, focus on the gaps. Find the areas that matter the most and where you're missing and dive into those. Ask yourself, what is causing this variance? And just dig deeper. There could be some bigger underlying business issue. It might not have anything to do with anything you can see on the spreadsheet, but this is what is going to alert you that you have an issue and you need to dive in. Now, I want to also encourage you to use KPIs. Who knows what KPIs are? Yeah. Exactly. These are simple metrics that show you how you're performing against your budget. These are just some common KPIs examples. We got revenue KPIs, our number of leads, our number of leads by source. How many proposals are we sending out, and what's the volume of those? What are your conversions by lead source, your average job size? But there could be some operational KPIs as well. Our gross profit margins, our net profit margins, our revenue per employee, our overhead as a percentage of revenue, our marketing spend as a percentage of revenue. Like, whatever the key drivers are for your business, it's extremely important that you identify those. And they need to be simple, trackable. You have to be able to measure them, quantify them so that you can track them and understand, are we hitting our targets or are we missing our targets? These will help you understand your performance. They're going to help you to easily compare your actuals to your budget. This is going to let you spot problems ahead of time. If you could plug a hole, fix a leak today, you should fix it today versus wait till the end of the year to say, oh crap, well, there goes all of our money out that hole that I could have plugged, but I just didn't know. This is giving you insight in real time. This can also help prove to yourself that the changes you're making are actually working. And again, this can be a great way to communicate and to motivate your team. Rally the troops. Share your KPIs with them. Get everybody aligned and working together to hit those goals. Use dashboards to run your leadership meetings. When you come upstairs, you're going to see we have dashboards all over the office. Like, the entire company has visibility into our performance in every single area. These are great ways to share that insight. You're going to be able to see your numbers visually, not just buried in some spreadsheet, but front and center. These are the most important metrics, and so you should focus on it. You're going to be able to spot those trends. Are we trending up or are we trending down? If you're trending down, there's probably problems. There could be opportunities for improvement. Like, you want to see positive trends. This is going to help you catch those issues earlier and address them. So again, I think Anna will be doing a dashboard training at some point, maybe tomorrow. I just, as a best practice, I think it's important to keep them simple. You can come up with all sorts of ways to slice and dice this data, but figure out, like, what are the KPIs, the key performance indicators. Focus on those. Start small, 5 to 8 of them. Start small and focus on those. Review them daily, weekly, monthly. Obsess over them. All of us, our whole team, probably spends more time than maybe I want staring at our dashboards, but we track our progress. We know where we're at any given moment. And that's so important. Again, I encourage you, to the extent that you are willing and able, like, be as transparent as you possibly can. Radical transparency will bring your team together. It will help make sure you're all on the same page, rowing in the same direction, trying to accomplish the same goals. What gets measured gets managed. Remember that. So I'm going to now, I think I got maybe just a few minutes. We'll just kind of give you a brief little walk through here of what this actually looks like. Let me see if I can change my screen. All right, so this is the template that we're going to give you guys. You're going to be able to download this in just a second. No, and so there's a couple different tabs. We have some instructions. Thanks, Matt, for putting that in there. We've got our annual budget. This is kind of where it all sort of boils up to. This is that main kind of our revenue, our COGS, our gross profit, our overhead, and our net profit right here. And you can see that some of these areas, as you think about your overhead, and really drill into payroll, you may want to have some places where you can kind of, phase people in. This is where you can go plug in numbers. As soon as I hire someone, I'm going to start having a monthly cost for that person. So you can start plugging in those numbers and seeing the impact on the bottom line. Now, a couple of the other tabs. So we talked earlier about the revenue model. This is kind of where you're building out the revenue. This is where you can start plugging in, like, what do we think we can get from referrals every month? What's realistic? The more networked you are, the more events you're participating in, the more, inbound referrals, the better. But like, set some realistic goals. What do you think you can get from organic? Like, what's happening today? What are you getting today? And then again, at the end of the day, like, if you're not getting enough leads, that means you're not going to close enough to get enough jobs to hit the revenue that you need. So start playing with your marketing spend. Your marketing spend is directly correlated to the number of leads that you should be able to get in. So make sure that whatever you need to spend, you plug it in here so that you can have that tie back into the budget to make sure we're not, burning through all the cash. But it's all directly related. And so again, there's a lot of assumptions that you'll need to come in and play with. But this tool allows you to start playing with those assumptions, to start setting those. As much of the historical data as you have, use that data to try to make as accurate guesses that you can. But just remember, like, these are going to be guesses. There's no silver bullet here. Again, you could be wildly off, but at least now you'll know why and where you're wildly off, and you can course correct and make adjustments. I encourage you, though, set your annual budget for the year. Even if you want to make, maybe a midway adjustment, things like that, cool. But like, save a copy so that at the beginning of the year, here's what we set out to do. At the end of the year, here's how we performed. That insight will be extremely helpful. Now, with us, we have almost hit our sales goal for the entire year. So we're going to go through an exercise to now kind of, adjust our end of the year, our second half of the year goals. We're still going to keep our budget that we set out for, just so we know what do we originally set to do, but we're going to need to go make some adjustments to keep growing, set new goals. And then lastly, this is your budgets versus your actuals. So everything up top, this is being pulled in from the budget. Everything in blue, this is you plugging in every month. At the end of every month, once you have gotten the confirmed numbers from your bookkeeper, you plug it in. So for the majority of the year, you might have a bunch of blanks. All the blue stuff, that'll be blank. But this is going to calculate your variance. This is going to show you where are you performing, where are you not, where are you missing. Anything in green is good, red is bad. It's that simple. Take the time to go through this exercise. And again, you might already have another budget. Awesome, great, use that. If you don't have one, you can literally just take a copy of this, save it. This is just our example. This is our template to give you. This is a starting point. Tailor it for your business. Understand how you want to forecast and drive your model. Know what the inputs are. Track those. All the KPIs, the outputs, the things that are most important that are driving your business. Build dashboards and JobTread on those. Make sure your accountant, your bookkeeper is reporting in the way that you can easily plug this in and understand your performance. Does that all make sense? Everyone tracking? I know I've covered a lot. This brief little 45-minute stint. I hope you're feeling inspired. I hope you're feeling empowered to take control of your financial future. This can make or break your company. I've given you the tools, the insights, the strategies. We're going to give you this model. But at the end of the day, it's up to you. Knowledge without action is just potential, right? It's time to put this playbook into motion. 1 year from today, where do you want to be? I would love for each and every one of you to email me 1 year from today and tell me how have you performed against your budget that you set forth. As a practical next step, though, this is where you can download a copy of that. Just scan that QR code there. I think it should also probably be on the back of that book. But I want to make this as easy as possible for you to implement what we've discussed. Here's a direct way to get started. This isn't just another spreadsheet. It's the foundation for building a financially sound and resilient business. Tonight, tomorrow, at some point, the end of the weekend at the latest, I want you to sit down with this template and don't just look at it. Start outlining your revenue, your costs, your gross profit. Start thinking about your lead conversions, your funnel, what KPIs you're going to track. Take that first step, and then another, and then another. You've got to start somewhere, because the truth is, success isn't a destination. It's a journey. That journey begins with a single decisive action. You have to implement. Don't just leave here with ideas. Leave with a plan. Leave with this template. Leave determined to make it happen. You can achieve your goals, and this will help you put forth the plan that you need to execute on to make them happen. We're here to support you. There is nothing that I want more than to see each and every one of you be successful. You can do this. I know you can do this. Every single one of you. Please use our team, though. We are here for you. I cannot express that enough. Genuinely, we are passionate to help you build a successful business. Your customer success managers are passionate about your success. That is what our team is all about. We want to be that resource for you. And our community is here for you. This is the whole mantra of this JobTread community. It's to support each other. So tap into the community. Share those best practices. Share your struggles. Learn from others. As a community, you can elevate. And go out there, grab this template, start building it. Can't wait to see what you're able to do with it. One other aside, if you enjoyed this playbook, we also have the business playbook. This QR code here, is also available on our website. You can download that. I think there's a video. We've recorded it. If it's not on that page yet, we're going to add it. But you can also just Google JobTread business playbook. You should find it on YouTube. I think I've got a couple of the talks recorded. Definitely encourage you to check that one out as well. Really talks about how to build a great company and great culture, the things you need to focus on. But again, really appreciate everyone being here. Sorry, Anna, I ran over, but I'm trying. All right.